After 14 years of pouring my blood, sweat, and soul into building a real estate empire from the ground up for my own sister, I finally learned the brutal truth about family loyalty and the devastating cost of my own silence. My name is Tessa Franklin. I'm 43 and I'm a graphic designer and marketing strategist. For over a decade, I was the unseen engine behind Franklin Realty's meteoric rise in Denver. I designed every logo, built every website, crafted every award-winning marketing campaign, and implemented every piece of digital infrastructure that made the company a household name. I was the architect of its success, the ghost in its machine. What I didn't know, what I couldn't allow myself to see for so long, was that my greatest professional creation was being meticulously weaponized against me, setting the stage for a betrayal so profound it would shatter my world before ultimately liberating me. The truth I discovered wasn't just about stolen labor or intellectual property. It was about the insidious nature of familial exploitation and the chilling realization that the person I trusted most saw me not as a partner, but as a tool. If you've ever poured your heart into something only to be dismissed, devalued, or outright betrayed by someone you loved, comment, "I've been there," below and make sure you subscribe. Trust me, if you're a creative, a builder, or anyone who's ever felt like their contributions were invisible while someone else took the bows, this story will resonate deep in your bones, and it will show you that the power to reclaim your worth often lies in the very skills they took for granted. The phone call I received last week confirming the final delicious piece of karma was the most satisfying sound I've ever heard, but it was the journey to that call that truly changed everything. Growing up, I was always the quiet one, the observer, the older sister lost in her sketchbooks and ideas, while Melinda, 5 years my junior, effortlessly charmed everyone around her. She was the golden child, magnetic and ambitious, always knowing how to get what she wanted. When she announced at 24, fresh out of college with a business degree and a dazzling smile, that she wanted to start her own real estate agency, Franklin Realty, I was her biggest cheerleader. I was 29, already making a name for myself as a freelance graphic designer and nascent marketing strategist. "Tess, you're so brilliant at this stuff," she'd said, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Imagine what we could build together, Franklin Realty. It'll be our legacy. 50-50 partners down the line once we get it off the ground. You handle all the creative, the branding, the marketing, and I'll be the face, the deal maker. We'll be unstoppable." And for a while, the dream felt real. I poured everything into Franklin Realty. For the first 5 years, I worked from my cramped apartment, then a small desk in the corner of her ever-expanding offices, often pulling all-nighters. I designed the elegant FR monogram that became synonymous with luxury Denver properties, built the first sleek website on a shoestring budget, created the compelling brochures, and masterminded the initial marketing strategies that got us noticed, all of it unpaid. "It's sweat equity, Tesca," Melinda would say, squeezing my arm. "We're investing in our future. Once the profits really roll in, we'll formalize everything." The profits did roll in. Boy, did they roll in. Franklin Realty exploded. Melinda was a phenomenal salesperson, I'll give her that. But her sales were fueled by the brand I built, the leads I generated, the reputation for sophistication and cutting-edge marketing I meticulously cultivated. Yet my name was never mentioned. At industry awards where Franklin Realty consistently swept marketing categories, Melinda would accept the accolades, thanking her amazing team in a vague, sweeping gesture that never singled me out. I'd be in the audience heart, sinking a little further each time, telling myself it was enough to see our shared dream flourish. The red flags were there, fluttering insistently, if only I'd had the courage to see them for what they were. About 5 years into our partnership, after a particularly innovative campaign I designed, landed Franklin Realty its first multi-million-dollar commercial client. I broached the subject of that long-promised formal agreement. We were celebrating at a chic downtown restaurant, the champagne flowing. "Melinda," I began, trying to sound casual. "Now that things are really taking off, maybe we should get that partnership agreement down on paper just to make it all official." She'd laughed a bright, tinkling sound that suddenly felt dismissive. "Oh, Tess, don't be so serious. We're family. My family doesn't need complicated paperwork, little sister. Just trust me. When the company is a bit more stable, when we've got a bigger cushion, then we'll sort all that boring stuff. You know I'm good for it." She'd ordered another bottle of champagne, and the moment passed, leaving a small, cold knot in my stomach. Our future. The words started to feel less like a promise and more like a carefully constructed cage. From that day on, a tiny seed of caution made me ensure that any critical new digital assets like primary domain registrations or core hosting accounts for new major projects were initially under my name and personal email. A silent, subconscious act of self-preservation I couldn't even fully articulate to myself at the time. It was just a just-in-case measure for the complex systems I alone understood. The exploitation wasn't just financial, it was a constant erosion of my professional identity. Around 2 years before the end, the company's email marketing system, which I had custom configured, experienced a severe catastrophic failure, right before a critical quarterly market report was due to be blasted to thousands of our high-net-worth clients. Panic ensued. Melinda and the half-dozen salaried employees she now had were completely helpless, staring blankly at error messages. Melinda called me, her voice tight with anxiety. "Tessa, you have to fix this. It's a disaster." Despite feeling increasingly disregarded and resentful of the fact that a new marketing assistant fresh out of college was earning a salary I could only dream of, I spent the entire evening sacrificing my personal time yet again untangling the mess. By 2 a.m., it was fixed. Melinda's only acknowledgement was a quick, "Oh, thank God you're a lifesaver, Tess Poem," the next morning before she breezed off to a client meeting. There was no real understanding or appreciation of the complexity of the problem or the skill it took to solve it. It just reinforced her view of me as the ever-reliable, invisible tech support, and my growing realization that she was utterly, dangerously dependent on me without even knowing it. My attempts to assert my value were always deftly deflected. When Melinda hired Chelsea York, a vapid but admittedly popular local influencer, as a brand ambassador at a ridiculous salary, I gently pointed out the disparity. "Melinda Chelsea's getting paid more in a month than I've seen in a decade of building this company with you." She'd sighed that patronizing sigh I'd come to dread. "Tessa Chelsea brings a different kind of value, social media reach. It's what big clients want to see. Your family. Your reward is the success of the company we're building together. Don't be petty." The pattern was clear. My work was foundational, but my worth was negligible. 6 months before the firing, I presented a meticulously researched commercial real estate marketing strategy I'd spent weeks developing. It had the potential, conservatively, to increase commercial revenue by 40%. Melinda barely glanced at it. Chelsea, who now had Melinda's ear, had pitched some fluffy ideas about TikTok dances for luxury listings. "I think I know my business better than anyone, Tessa," Melinda had said coolly, tapping Chelsea's flimsy proposal. "We need to be fresh, modern." Weeks later, I discovered Melinda had quietly implemented a key digital outreach component from my dismissed commercial strategy, passing it off as her own genius at a networking event. When I confronted her, my voice trembling with suppressed anger, she'd waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, come on, Tessa. We're family. What's mine is yours. What's yours is mine, right? Don't be so territorial." The gaslighting was breathtaking. The final chilling piece of this ugly puzzle slid into place 3 weeks before my world imploded. I was working late as usual and overheard Melinda on a conference call in her glass-walled office. Her voice was animated, persuasive. She was pitching to a potential major investor, laying out the unique vision of Franklin Realty. My blood ran cold as I heard her describe in detail my proprietary marketing frameworks, my unique branding philosophy, my innovative digital integration systems, all the intellectual property I had painstakingly developed over 14 years, as solely her own brilliant conceptions. She was leveraging my entire life's work to command premium investment and inflate her own genius. The psychological toll was immense. I was a ghost in my own success story, my confidence eroded by 1,000 tiny cuts. I coped by throwing myself deeper into the work, clinging to the fading hope that one more groundbreaking campaign, one more massive client, one more technical save would finally make her see, finally make her honor that decade-old promise. I started preparing a comprehensive proposal for a property management division. A natural expansion entirely, my concept designed to be so profitable, so undeniably brilliant, that she would have to formalize our partnership. That proposal, I thought, would be my last stand. Little did I know she was preparing to discard me entirely. The air in Franklin Realty had grown thick with an unspoken tension, and I was about to find out why. The day it all came crashing down started with a sliver of desperate hope. I clutched the glossy spiral-bound proposal for the Franklin Realty Property Management Division. It was my magnum opus, a culmination of months of research, financial projections, and strategic planning. This, I told myself, was it. This was the undeniable proof of my value, the key to finally unlocking that 50-50 partnership. I walked into Melinda's chic, minimalist office. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off the numerous awards, our awards, lining her shelves. She was perched on the edge of her expensive ergonomic chair, a tight, unreadable smile on her face. Chelsea York, her influencer protégé, was lounging on the plush visitor sofa, scrolling through her phone with an air of bored entitlement. An unease settled over me. "Melinda," I began, my voice betraying a slight tremor. "I've finished the property management proposal. I think you'll be incredibly impressed with the revenue potential. This could be a game changer for us." I slid the heavy document across her polished desk. Melinda didn't even glance at it. She picked it up, weighed it in her hand for a moment, and then, with a flick of her wrist, tossed it onto a nearby side table as if it were junk mail. My heart plummeted. "Tessa," she said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth, replaced by an icy formality I'd never heard directed at me. "We need to talk about your role here." Chelsea smirked from the sofa, not even looking up from her phone. "My role?" I stammered, confusion warring with a rising dread. "Yes," Melinda continued, her gaze cold and direct. "Franklin Realty is moving in a new, more dynamic direction. We need fresh energy, a more contemporary approach to our branding and marketing. Chelsea here is going to be taking the lead on that." The air left my lungs. "Chelsea. But she's a social media influencer. I've built this entire brand, our entire digital presence from scratch, for 14 years. Melinda let out a short, impatient sigh. "Tessa, your work was fine for its time, but things change. We need to be agile. And frankly, your attitude lately hasn't been conducive to the positive, forward-thinking environment I'm cultivating." The injustice of it, the sheer audacity choked me. My attitude. "Melinda, I've worked for free for you for 14 years. I've asked for nothing but the partnership you promised me from day one. This company wouldn't exist without me." A flicker of something ugly crossed Melinda's face. "Don't be dramatic, Tessa. You were a great help in the early days, but Franklin Realty has outgrown your limited skill set." She stood up, a clear dismissal. "Your services are no longer required. HR will process your final paycheck for this month." A final paycheck. For a month, after 14 years of unpaid foundational labor, the betrayal was a physical blow stealing my breath. Tears pricked my eyes, blurring her cold, impassive face. Then came the words that would echo in my mind for weeks, the words that finally cauterized the wound of my misplaced loyalty. "Honestly, Tessa," Melinda said, her voice laced with a cruel disdain I'd never imagined she possessed, "your contributions were adequate. But let's be real. Pathetic people like you don't deserve credit anyway." Pathetic. From the sofa, Chelsea finally looked up, a malicious glint in her eyes. "Yeah," she drawled. "Maybe try Fiverr, sweetie. You might find some gigs there." The world tilted. 14 years of dreams, sacrifices, and unwavering dedication incinerated in a matter of minutes by the sister I had loved and trusted, reduced to pathetic by a vapid influencer. I felt a hollowness so profound it threatened to swallow me whole. I was defeated, crushed, humiliated. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. I just stumbled out of her office, out of the building I had metaphorically and literally built the sound of their light, dismissive laughter echoing behind me like shards of glass. My career, my future, my family bond, all of it lay in ruins. This was my lowest point, the absolute nadir of my existence. I walked through the streets of Denver in a daze, the city's sounds muffled the bright sunshine, a cruel mockery of the darkness engulfing me. Each step was heavy laden with the weight of Melinda's betrayal and Chelsea's sneering contempt. Pathetic people like you don't deserve credit anyway. The words were a relentless refrain, each syllable a fresh stab to my already bleeding self-worth. I reached my small apartment, the one I could barely afford, despite being the architect of a multi-million-dollar company, and collapsed onto the sofa, the sobs finally breaking free. Raw, racking sobs that tore through me. Hours passed. The initial storm of grief began to subside, leaving behind a chilling emptiness. And then as the last rays of sunlight faded from my window, something shifted. A tiny cold spark ignited in the desolate landscape of my mind. As I replayed Melinda's cruel dismissal, her arrogant assumption of my powerlessness, a different thought began to form, cutting through the pain with surprising clarity. She thinks I'm nothing. She thinks she holds all the cards. And then it hit me, a crystal-clear realization that sliced through the fog of despair. I had more power in this situation than either of them understood. 14 years. 14 years of building, coding, designing, registering. The Franklin Realty domain name, registered by T. Franklin. The hosting account for the primary website and all its intricate databases. Billed to my personal credit card for years before being shifted to a company account I still had master admin access to. The CRM system holding every client, every lead, every deal Franklin Realty had ever made. I was the sole original super administrator. The email marketing platform, the social media dashboards, the proprietary analytics software I'd integrated, all set up under my credentials with backdoor access. I alone knew. No contracts, no work for hire agreements, no official transfer of intellectual property. Melinda, in her arrogance and her casual dismissal of boring paperwork when it came to my partnership, had made a colossal oversight. Legally, a vast majority of the digital assets, the brand identity I'd conceived, the very essence of Franklin Realty's operational infrastructure was mine. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text message. It was from David Chen, one of Franklin Realty's top brokers, a decent man I'd always had a good professional rapport with. Tessa, it read, just heard you. Resigned. So sorry to hear that. You were the heart of this place. Honestly, this company won't run smoothly without you. We all know who really built Franklin Realty. A small, watery smile touched my lips. Someone saw. Someone knew. It wasn't much, but it was a lifeline. David's message, coupled with my dawning realization about my IP ownership, fanned that tiny spark into a flickering flame of resolve. The devastation was still there, a gaping wound, but now a new steely determination began to crystallize around it. Melinda had tried to erase me. She and Chelsea had laughed as they threw me away like trash. They thought I would just disappear, a pathetic, forgotten footnote in Franklin Realty's glorious story. Little did they know the story was far from over. The stakes had just been irrevocably raised. Melinda thought she had just cut ties with a disposable employee. She had no idea she had just declared war on the very architect of her empire, an architect who held the blueprints and, more importantly, the keys to the entire kingdom. That night, I didn't sleep. I researched copyright law, intellectual property rights for freelancers, digital asset ownership. By dawn, the path ahead was terrifyingly clear. The next few days were a blur of furtive activity fueled by a potent cocktail of grief, righteous anger, and adrenaline. The pain of Melinda's betrayal was a constant ache, but the clarity of my position was a surprisingly steadying force. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a woman with a legitimate claim and the means to enforce it. My first call was to a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a bulldog I'd heard about who specialized in intellectual property disputes and wasn't afraid to take on entrenched businesses. I laid out the entire 14-year history, the lack of contracts, my creation of all core assets, Melinda's promises, and the brutal firing. Ms. Anya Sharma listened intently, her expression growing grimmer with each detail. When I finished, she looked at the mountain of evidence I'd already started compiling. Original design files with timestamps predating Franklin Realty's incorporation domain registration receipts in my name, initial hosting invoices, communication logs. Her eyes lit up with a predatory gleam. "Ms. Franklin," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face, "your sister hasn't just been unethical. She's been monumentally foolish. Based on what you've shown me, you have an exceptionally strong claim to the vast majority of Franklin Realty's operational and brand assets. We're not talking about a wrongful dismissal suit here. We're talking about reclaiming what is legally yours." Anya's validation was like a shot of iron to my soul. She outlined the strategy: formal notification of copyright ownership, cease and desist letters for infringing use of my IP, and then the systematic reclamation of digital assets if Melinda refused to negotiate a fair buyout, which, knowing Melinda, Anya suspected she would. "People like your sister," Anya mused, "often believe their own hype. They can't conceive of a reality where they aren't in complete control." Meanwhile, Melinda, blissfully ignorant of the storm gathering, was already making moves. A discreet inquiry through a former colleague confirmed my suspicion Melinda was frantically trying to hire a new marketing agency and a web developer to take over the systems. She was offering a premium desperate to ensure a seamless transition away from the outdated Tessa. The irony was bitter, but it also added a crucial element of urgency. She was about to discover that taking over systems you don't own and can't access is a rather complicated proposition. The depth of Melinda's duplicity continued to reveal itself. I remembered the investor call I'd overheard where she'd pitched my strategies as her own. It wasn't just credit she craved, it was the illusion of genius, an illusion built entirely on my stolen intellectual labor. For 14 years, she had systematically stripped me of recognition, compensation, and dignity, all while smiling sweetly and talking about our future. The mask was off now. Melinda wasn't just a ruthless businesswoman, she was a calculating exploiter who had preyed on the deepest of bonds, sisterly love and loyalty, for personal gain. That was the breaking point. The last vestiges of sorrow and self-pity were burned away by a cold, cleansing rage. There would be no more tears for Melinda Franklin. She had built her castle on my land using my bricks, my plans, my labor. Now I was going to repossess the quarry. Anya and I drafted the official letters. The plan was precise, methodical. We would give Melinda 1 week from receipt of the notification to acknowledge my ownership and begin good faith negotiations for the licensing or sale of the IP. If, as we suspected, she chose to fight or ignore it, then I would begin reclaiming direct control of every digital asset I legally owned. "Are you sure you're ready for this, Tessa?" Anya asked, her gaze steady. "This will be a battle. It will get ugly." I looked at her, my own gaze unwavering. She called me pathetic. She told me I didn't deserve credit. She and her little influencer friend laughed as I walked away with nothing. Ugly Ms. Sharma, I'm just getting started. Melinda Franklin is about to learn what it truly means to build something from scratch, because that's exactly what she'll have to do when I take back everything that's mine. The decision was made. The Rubicon was crossed. There was no turning back. The week that followed the delivery of Anya Sharma's meticulously crafted legal package to Franklin Realty was eerily silent. No calls, no emails, no desperate attempts at contact from Melinda. It was the kind of arrogant silence that Anya had predicted. She's either in denial, thinks she can bulldoze her way through this, or is getting terrible legal advice, Anya had remarked dryly. Probably all three. For me, It was a week of tense preparation of double-checking credentials, access protocols, and the legal framework for each step of the reclamation. My anger had cooled into a steely resolve. This wasn't about revenge anymore, not entirely. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming my work, my identity, and my power. On the 8th day, with no response from Melinda, Anya gave me the green light. "She's had her chance, Tessa. Time to secure your property." I decided against a dramatic, unannounced digital shutdown. That felt too much like Melinda's level of petty cruelty. Instead, I emailed Melinda personally, CCing Anya and Melinda's lawyer, whose details Anya had obtained. The subject line was succinct: urgent meeting request transition of intellectual property and digital assets. I requested an in-person meeting the following afternoon, stating it was to discuss the orderly transfer of operational control of assets legally owned by Tessa Franklin. Melinda's reply was surprisingly swift and curt. "Fine, my office, 2 p.m., don't be late." Chelsea York was CC'd on the reply. The arrogance was palpable. She clearly thought I was crawling back, perhaps to beg for a pittance or to negotiate some face-saving severance. She had no idea she was walking into her own dismantling. The next day, I walked into the Franklin Realty office not as the downtrodden, discarded sister, but as Tessa Franklin, rightful owner. I was dressed in a sharply tailored suit Anya had insisted I buy. Power dressing Tessa, it matters. And in my briefcase was a single file containing copies of the key legal documents, the cease and desist order summaries of my copyright claims domain, ownership verifications, and hosting account credentials. Melinda was seated behind her expansive desk, a picture of boardroom confidence. Chelsea was draped over the visitor's sofa again, idly buffing her nails, radiating smug indifference. The air crackled with unspoken animosity. "So, Tessa," Melinda began, her voice dripping with condescension, a slight victorious smirk playing on her lips, "decided to be reasonable, have we? What is it you want? A glowing letter of recommendation, perhaps? A small settlement to tide you over?" Chelsea snickered softly. I placed my briefcase on the polished mahogany table between us and met Melinda's gaze, my own calm and unwavering. "I'm not here to negotiate my exit, Melinda," I stated, my voice even and clear, devoid of the tremor I'd feared. "I'm here to inform you formally that I am reclaiming legal ownership and control of all intellectual property I created for Franklin Realty, effective immediately." I opened the briefcase and slid the file across the desk. This includes, but is not limited to, the Franklin Realty brand identity, logos, color palettes, typography, all marketing collateral developed over the past 14 years, the primary company website franklinrealtidenver.com, its underlying code and content management system, the customer relationship management database, and its 14 years of client data, and all associated digital infrastructure, including social media accounts and email marketing platforms. The smirk vanished from Melinda's face. Chelsea stopped buffing her nails, her head snapping up. What is this nonsense?" Melinda stammered, her eyes flicking from the file to my face, a dawning horror in their depths. "You can't do this. This is Franklin Realty's property. I built this company." "Actually, Melinda," I replied, my voice still steady, "I can, and I am. You built the sales, I'll give you that. But I built the brand, the systems, the entire operational backbone. And you never formalized my role. There was never a work-for-hire agreement, no contract transferring intellectual property rights from me to Franklin Realty. Under U.S. copyright law, the creator is the owner, unless those rights are explicitly signed away. You never bothered with that boring paperwork, remember?" I saw a flash of genuine panic in her eyes, quickly masked by bluster. "This is insane. We're family. I'll sue you into oblivion. I'll destroy you." Her voice rose, cracking slightly. "You're right, Melinda. We were family," I said, a genuine pang of sorrow briefly piercing my resolve. "That's what makes your exploitation of me for 14 years so egregious. As for suing me, my lawyer, Ms. Sharma, whose contact information is in that file, is quite confident in my position. In fact, she advises that Franklin Realty is currently infringing on my copyrights daily and has been for some time. Chelsea, wide-eyed, finally spoke her voice, a reedy whisper. Melinda, is this true? The website? The database? Melinda shot her a venomous glare, then turned back to me, her face contorted with fury. This is a joke, a pathetic shakedown. You wouldn't dare actually do anything. The company will be fine. We'll just rebuild faster, better. This was it. The moment of triumph, though it tasted more of bitter justice than sweet revenge. I took a slow breath. It's not a shakedown, Melinda. It's a reclamation. And I already have. As we speak, administrative access to the primary web hosting is being rerouted. The franklinrealtidenver.com domain is locked under my control. Within the hour, anyone visiting the site will see a simple maintenance page, site undergoing essential maintenance. Copyright held by Tessa Franklin. Access to the CRM with all its client data is now restricted to my credentials only. The email marketing service has been suspended. The main social media accounts are currently having their administrative ownership verified and secured by me. Melinda's jaw literally dropped. She scrambled for her mouse, clicking furiously. Her screen remained stubbornly logged out of the admin panel. She grabbed her phone, her fingers flying across the screen, presumably trying to access the back-end systems. Her face paled. Chelsea was now staring at me, mouth agape, the picture of dawning realization. You bitch! Melinda finally shrieked, her voice raw. You're trying to destroy me. I stood up, picking up my briefcase. No, Melinda, I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm simply taking back what is mine. You told me pathetic people don't deserve credit. You were so eager to take all the credit for Franklin Realty's success. Well, now you get to take all the credit for whatever happens next without the pathetic person who actually built it for you. I turned and walked towards the door, the sound of Melinda's incoherent screaming and the frantic clatter of her keyboard filling the opulent office. As I reached the reception area, I could hear her yelling into her phone, presumably to her lawyer, panic lacing every word. The receptionist stared at me, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. I walked out of Franklin Realty for the second time, but this time I wasn't broken. I wasn't defeated. I was Tessa Franklin, and I had just reclaimed my life's work. The immediate consequences were just beginning, but for the first time in a very long time, I felt a profound sense of peace. The storm had broken, and I was still standing. The first 24 to 48 hours after I walked out of Melinda's office were by all accounts from the outside pure, unadulterated chaos for Franklin Realty, true to my word. franklinrealtidenver.com resolved to a stark white page with a single, elegant line of text, site undergoing essential maintenance. All content copyright Tessa Franklin. For inquiries, please contact Anya Sharma's law firm. The company's main phone lines began to ring off the hook. Agents couldn't access the CRM, meaning no client lists, no property details, no deal tracking. Their customized Franklin Realty email addresses started bouncing messages. Scheduled email marketing blasts promoting new listings failed to send. The sleek social media profiles I'd curated were suddenly displaying a pinned post. Our platform is currently under review to ensure compliance with intellectual property rights. We apologize for any inconvenience. And this message, meticulously crafted by Anya and posted by me via the master credentials, was professional yet damning. Melinda predictably went into meltdown mode. My phone lit up with a barrage of increasingly hysterical calls and texts, furious accusations, tearful pleas, desperate bargaining. I let them all go to voicemail, then forwarded the more threatening ones to Anya and blocked Melinda's number. All communication as established would go through our lawyers. Chelsea York, in a spectacularly misguided attempt at damage control, tried to leverage her personal Instagram account. She posted a selfie with a brave face captioned, "Big things happening at Franklin Realty, a little tech hiccup, but we're Franklin Realty strong and coming back better than ever. Girl boss Denver real estate resilience." The post was accompanied by a hastily made garish graphic, clearly not my work, with a temporary Gmail address for inquiries. The comments section quickly became a dumpster fire. Real estate professionals, clients, and savvy social media users mocked the amateurish post, questioned the tech hiccup, and asked why the official website attributed copyright to a Tessa Franklin. Chelsea's firefighting only fanned the flames, highlighting her ineptitude and making Franklin Realty a laughingstock in local online circles. She deleted the post within hours, but the screenshots, of course, lived forever. Melinda's legal team, a bewildered corporate firm clearly out of its depth in IP law, sent a flurry of threatening letters filled with bluster and demands. Anya calmly and methodically dismantled each claim, reiterating my ownership and Franklin Realty's ongoing infringement. The message was clear: the assets were mine, and they would remain mine unless Melinda was prepared to negotiate a fair market value for their purchase or license. A sum that would, by necessity, have to account for 14 years of unpaid foundational creative labor. Meanwhile, the internal hemorrhaging at Franklin Realty was severe. David Chen, the top broker who had texted me his support, was the first to jump ship. He called me the evening of the reclamation as I'd started to think of it. Tessa. He said, his voice a mix of shock and admiration. I don't know all the details, but I know you were the backbone of that place. What Melinda did, well, she underestimated you. Severely. The office is a madhouse. No one can work. 3 other senior agents are drafting their resignations as we speak. This isn't just a tech issue, it's a meltdown of trust. He was right. By the end of the week, 5 of Franklin Realty's top producing agents had quit, citing the operational collapse, the uncertainty surrounding the company's future, and ethical concerns regarding management practices. Whispers about Melinda's treatment of her sister, the secret genius behind the brand, began to circulate rapidly through the tight-knit Denver real estate community. My carefully neutral stance, communicating only through Anya, allowed the facts to speak for themselves. I wasn't slinging mud. I was simply standing on my rights. The investors Melinda had been courting, the ones she'd pitched my ideas to, caught wind of the implosion. An emergency meeting was called. They wanted to know how the company's entire digital presence and intellectual property could be so vulnerable, so completely tied to one disgruntled former employee. The narrative Melinda was desperately trying to spin. When Anya, upon their inquiry, provided them with a concise summary of my legal position and the documented history of my creations, the disgruntled employee story fell apart. They realized Melinda hadn't just been exploiting her sister. She'd misrepresented the fundamental ownership of the company's core assets to them. Tessa Franklin was no longer an invisible ghost. My name was suddenly on the lips of everyone in Denver real estate. I established firm boundaries. No emotional appeals from family members or parents were understandably horrified and confused, caught in the crossfire. No back-channel attempts at negotiation. Everything was to be handled legally and professionally. My newfound confidence was a quiet, steady hum beneath the surface. I wasn't an avenging angel. I was a professional reclaiming what was hers. The support that began to trickle in was validating. Old colleagues, former clients who'd always admired my work, even strangers who'd heard the story and reached out with messages of encouragement. The community reaction was shifting from shocked gossip to a grudging respect for the woman who had dared to take on a titan she herself had built. The wheels of justice and karma were slowly but surely beginning to turn. 9 months later, the Denver skyline looked different to me, sharper, clearer. I stood in my new office, the director of marketing for Miller & Associates Real Estate, one of Denver's most prestigious and forward-thinking firms. The nameplate on my door, Tessa Franklin, felt like a quiet declaration of victory. Harrison Miller, the firm's principal, had been a Franklin Realty client years ago. He'd always been impressed with the sophistication of the campaigns I'd anonymously designed. When news of the Franklin Realty debacle and my role in it became the talk of the town, he'd reached out, not with pity, but with a job offer that stunned me, a remarkable salary profit. sharing full creative control and a budget that made my Franklin Realty days feel like a distant, impoverished dream. One of my first major projects at Miller and Associates was the launch of their new property management division. The very proposal Melinda had tossed aside with such contempt. Under my guidance with a dedicated team and proper resources, it was already exceeding all profit projections. I was finally getting credit for my ideas, my strategies, my vision. My campaigns for Miller and Associates were already garnering industry buzz, and there was talk of awards. More importantly, I felt respected, valued, and creatively fulfilled. I was building something truly mine within a structure that honored and compensated my contributions. The scars from Melinda's betrayal remained, but they were fading, overshadowed by a profound sense of peace and self-worth. I was confident setting healthy boundaries in all aspects of my life, and for the first time in years, genuinely happy. And Melinda Franklin Realty, the empire built on my back, had crumbled under the weight of its founder's hubris. The investors furious at her deception, and the operational paralysis had forced a massive restructuring. Franklin Realty ceased to exist. In its place, a new entity emerged, Elite Denver Properties. Melinda was allowed to stay on as a founding partner, a ceremonial title with no operational power and a drastically reduced financial stake. A seasoned, no-nonsense CEO, Robert Hayes, was brought in by the investor group to salvage what remained. Melinda's attempts to sue me for the intellectual property had failed spectacularly and expensively. Anya Sharma had systematically dismantled their case, and Melinda had been forced to either pay a hefty licensing fee for temporary transitional use of a few minor assets. I agreed to lease them on my terms, or attempt a full, costly rebrand from scratch under immense pressure. She chose a bit of both, a messy, expensive compromise. Chelsea York had vanished from the Denver social scene almost as quickly as she'd appeared, her influence or credibility shredded by her association with the Franklin Realty implosion and her cringeworthy attempts at damage control. Last I heard, she was trying to rebrand herself as a life coach in another state. The karma was multifaceted. Melinda lost her company, her power, and her reputation. The Denver real estate community, once so quick to laud her natural entrepreneurship, now viewed her with a mixture of pity and disdain. Her social standing evaporated. Our parents, after many difficult conversations, where the unvarnished truth of Melinda's 14-year exploitation finally sank in, were navigating a strained and awkward new reality. Their praise for Melinda's genius had fallen silent. Their relationship with me was slowly healing based on a new, more honest foundation. A few months into my tenure at Miller and Associates, I attended a major industry awards gala. I was there with Harrison and my new team, feeling confident and radiant in a new dress. Across the crowded ballroom, I saw her, Melinda. She was standing alone near a service exit, looking smaller, diminished the usual polished veneer, noticeably absent. She was with Robert Hayes, the new CEO of Elite Denver Properties, who was engrossed in a conversation with someone else, barely acknowledging her. Our eyes met for a fleeting second across the room. No malice in my gaze, no triumph, just a calm acknowledgement of how far we'd both come in very different directions. She looked away quickly, a flicker of something unreadable, shame, regret in her eyes. That brief, silent encounter spoke volumes more than any shouted confrontation ever could. The agents who had bravely quit Franklin Realty in solidarity or self-preservation had largely landed on their feet. 3 of them had even joined me at Miller and Associates and were now thriving in a stable, ethical environment. The saga had in a small way prompted some local businesses to reevaluate their own informal agreements with creative contributors, with a few reaching out to Anya Sharma's firm for advice on formalizing IP rights. Looking out my office window at the sprawling city, I thought back to Melinda's cruel words, "Pathetic people like you don't deserve credit anyway." A small smile touched my lips. I had the credit now. Not just the bylines and the awards, but the internal credit, the deep, unwavering knowledge of my own worth. I had faced the ultimate betrayal, and not only survived, but had emerged stronger, more successful, and most importantly, whole. I had built something truly mine on my own terms, and in doing so, had found a profound and lasting peace. The most profound lesson in all of this: your talent is yours. Your work has intrinsic value. Never ever let anyone, not a boss, not a client, not even family, diminish, devalue, or exploit that. The silence born of fear or misplaced loyalty can be a heavy chain, but the moment you decide to speak your truth and stand in your power, that chain begins to break. So I ask you, have you ever felt your contributions were invisible, your ideas stolen, or your worth dismissed? What did you do, or what do you wish you had the courage to do then? If you believe in the power of reclaiming your story and standing up for your worth, please like this post. If this resonated with you, subscribe for more stories of justice, resilience, and empowerment. And if you know someone who is feeling undervalued, unheard, or exploited, someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, share this story with them. Let them know they're not alone and that they possess more power than they realize. Comment below with your city or state and tell me what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone facing a similar situation of exploitation. Let's learn from each other. And hey, tag a friend who always has your back, the kind of person who champions your worth even when you doubt it yourself. Remember, the moment you truly recognize and honor your own value is the moment you begin to reclaim your power. You don't need to wait 14 years or even 14 days. Your time to shine, to be seen, to be credited, and to be compensated for your unique brilliance is now. Let's build a community where we lift each other up, celebrate each other's talents, and ensure every voice is heard and every contribution is valued. You are not pathetic. You are powerful, and you are not alone.